Awesome. Y'all, thank y'all for being here this evening. Like I said before, my name is Zach Knight, founder of ATL Vets. How many folks first time in an ATL Vets event? Jackie, put your hand down. All right. How about how many first timers at the Buckhead Club? A couple new people at the Buckhead Club. Perfect. So to kick this off, before we get rolling too far, I want to give a shout out to Jay, who is the assistant general manager up here at the Buckhead Club. None of this is possible without him, his team, the awesome folks up here to make this happen. We've been hosting this event for, Lord have mercy, 3.5 years now or so on a pretty consistent basis, where we love featuring people from all over the country in the veteran community and the veterans of service community, like this evening. So we've got some amazing things happening all across with ATL Vets. And tonight's special because not often do we have speakers fly in from DC day of. So Ed's going to have some interesting insights, and he's promised, now that he's no longer attached to the federal government, he is open to answer questions. So it'll be pretty fascinating as we talk through. We'll talk for about 20, 30 minutes, kind of hit his background, what he's doing now, some of the things that he can openly talk about that I know about. And then I think Jackie, who flew in from Boston this morning, has a list of things that she's going to ask.
I'm ready.
And he says he's ready. So it'll be perfect. But that's kind of the format of this evening. So it'll be really just kind of open environment, talking a little bit. We are literally recording, have a couple of people online. So if we do say anything, just so y'all are tracking, we do multi-purpose this, post it on our platform. So if you do say anything silly, or if there's anything that has to be redacted, we'll have to go back and talk about that part. But I just kick it off with just a good intro from you. I know you have a long history, and he sent me his professional bio, and it was one of those. And I wouldn't do it justice attached to really giving a rundown on your background. So Ed, if you would, introduce yourself to everybody and just tell them a little bit about all the amazing things you've been doing.
Sure. Oh, yeah. So first off, I want to say thank you for having me. I consider this an honor privilege. Thank you all for your service. I mean that very much so. And I think opportunities like this to be able to not only provide a different perspective, but also I think of it as a way of me honoring all that you've done for country. I have young children. I'm proud father of a daughter who just started at University of Virginia this year and is a Navy ROTC, so she's a midshipman now.
Boo. I was already talking smack to a couple Navy guys.
But the point is that it's all about what are we doing for the country, and not only for the country, but for the generations to come. And I think that's one of the driving factors for what you're going to hear from me next. So I guess let's go ahead and just do a quick walk down memory lane. So Ed Yu, formerly with the Bureau, I was a supervisory special agent there, and with a 20-year, 7-month-long career there. But before joining the Bureau, my background actually is in biochemistry and molecular biology. I consider myself a recovering biochemist. So I did 3 years of clinical research in autoimmune diseases, 6 years of research in academia in human gene therapy. So I was using HIV and using it for beneficial purposes as a delivery system for therapeutic genes to modify DNA. And then 3 years in the private sector working in cancer research. And so then 9/11 happened. And it just straight up pissed me off. So applied to the Bureau and was pleasantly surprised to be accepted. Then 4 months after graduating from the New Agent Academy, was assigned to the Los Angeles Joint Terrorism Task Force and was able to do exactly what I wanted to do. I was on the counterterrorism squad going after Al Qaeda. And during that time, after investing as a street agent, then headquarters became aware of my existence. And I got promoted up to the FBI's Weapons Mass Destruction Directorate. And my job was to identify emerging biological threats and to counter biological weapons. And so did that for 15 years up until my retirement. And so along those lines, ranging from, a lot of people forget, but 1 month after 9/11, you'll recall we had the anthrax surveillance, right? We had the Amerithrax investigation. So when I was brought on board, I was assisting the aftermath of that because we tend to forget, the anthrax was the ultimate insider threat, right? Professor Bruce Ivins was a researcher up at USAMRIID, top secret clearance. He also was certified in the Select Agent program, which is the biology's only security program. And despite all of that, perpetrated the only recorded bioterrorism attack anywhere. And we tend to forget about that. Get on my soapbox a little bit. We don't teach that to our students today, these days either, because you're going to hear me talk about the convergence of AI and biotech very soon. But as powerful as biotechnology is becoming and has become, it bothers me that the generation that we're having right now, like I said, I have kids. They should have a conversation in the very first 8th grade class, the very first biology class, to talk about, we have something called the Biological Weapons Convention. It's an international treaty that the US is a part of. It was established in 1975, and the whole world said, you know what, bioweapons is probably a bad idea, especially if the wind happens to blow the wrong way. And it could be a humanity-ending event. So they said, let's not deal with it. And to this day, we are still signatories to that treaty. We don't teach that to our students. And if you can program biology literally off your smartphone now, why aren't we? There's a reason why the BWC exists. We don't teach about the Tuskegee experiments, right? So here's where the government exploited our own citizens. The African-American community was a horrific experiment. And then the Henrietta Lacks story, right? So that's where a company exploited biology and a family and made billions and billions of dollars of that. So if we want to take this seriously, and this is a realization I came to when I first got promoted to headquarters, is that it's not just about bioweapons, it's about how do we responsibly use biotechnology as powerful as it's becoming, and not just in the US, but abroad, because there's so much at stake. So did investigations for a while, like you all recall, there were those colorful individuals that attempted to mail ricin toxin to President Obama. I was part of those investigations. I was sort of the bridge between collecting the evidence, analyzing it, and then translating that for the prosecutors, right? Because we have something called the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Statutes. Thankfully, we don't ever exercise them very much, so you can imagine that you have an assistant US attorney coming across this. And so I was a nerd that helped translate that, hey, when you have these scientific results from our laboratory division, this is how it supports this violation, how you can take it to court. And in all those, we successfully prosecuted those individuals. And I think one got 18 years in prison, another one, I think 20. But it shows cases too that you have to understand the science to be able to do the enforcement actions appropriately. That translated to then later on, I've had the honor of serving on the US delegation to the United Nations to the Biological Weapons Convention. So for 2 years in a row, I accompanied State Department to Geneva and represented the US before all the other countries to highlight what are we doing to protect biotechnology. And it's a very different perspective when you have a whole bunch of diplomats talking about it, but then you have, at the end of the day, I'm a cop. And, hey, here's how you exercise the law. And we just put a couple of bad people who attempted mailing, biological toxin to our president. They'd never experienced that before. So it's a different take rather than the traditional diplomacy or, Department of Defense to Ministry of Defense kind of interactions. That was really a huge honor. And then towards the end, I was able to serve on a joint duty assignment. So this is the ability to rotate to other agencies. And I went to the Department of Health and Human Services from 2019 to 2021. And you all recall what happened around that time frame. So it's either a combination of either right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time, because COVID hit. And HHS was like, dude, you're here, you're an FBI guy, and you have a biology background. Come on over. And so I got to spend 2 years supporting Operation Warp Speed. And I was part of the team that addressed protecting the supply chain from the mRNA vaccine development into the global distribution. And by the way, I had the opportunity to not only work with HHS, but DoD personnel that were working on logistics. They were literally manning the command center there 24/7 because we all recognized that lives were on the line. And I can't tell you what a privilege and honor it was to be able to work side by side with those men and women. They were completely dedicated. Every branch of the service, National Guard, Bureau, they were all there. Man, could they do logistics. And I think it's a shame because those are unsung heroes in what we accomplished with Operation Warp Speed. And we saved tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives because of that effort. And then when that ended, I then word got out I was available, and I got picked up by ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And for 2 years, I served as the National Counterintelligence Officer for emerging and disruptive technologies. So I was the Intel community lead for counterintel issues dealing with emerging tech issues like AI, quantum, semiconductor, autonomous systems like driverless cars or autonomous UAVs, fusion energy. I got my geek on in a big way. And then when all that came up, when that ended, I ended my tour back on the task force sitting in the National Counterintelligence Task Force. It was an interagency effort to basically look at how to protect US technologies and our research and private sector. And that was there, I was there for 1.5 years, and then I retired back on September 30, on my own terms. And I couldn't have timed it any better because we shut down the very next day. And so what I did since then was I launched my own consulting firm, EHY Consulting. And so basically what I thought was going to be helpful is rather than just be Chicken Little and say the sky is falling, take all the training, all my education, all of my experience, and bring strategic consulting and advising to academia, to private sector to come up with solutions now. And quite frankly, I think we're in a biotech space race, a global biotech space race for our lives. I don't think we fully appreciate that. And China is our biggest competitor in this space, and there is no points for second place. I don't think we fully appreciate that. And shameless plug, I'm going to be giving a presentation about that later on tomorrow. So thank you for that. But I will touch on that, and if you have questions, I'm happy to follow through on that. So all that being said is that had a wide variety of experience. I served at the White House as well too, looking at biosecurity national policy. And I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, basically. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to walk you through what my experiences were.
So that's why I didn't try to explain it. As an Army infantry guy, I understood this much of everything you just said. I know there's at least one Air Force guy here. You got it. Yep. So in the layman's terms, if you will, I know WMDs, bioweapons, all the things you're experienced in. Can you, in layman's terms, say what are we talking about? Are we talking about atomic bombs? Are we talking about Agent Orange? What does it actually look like for us to contextualize today?
Yeah, no, actually, we experienced it right with COVID. Like, we tend to forget that in the early stages of 2020, right? Do you all recall what happened to the USS Theodore Roosevelt? Right? It's our supercarrier. It's our most powerful way of projecting power around the world. And it got sidelined because of the virus. It got moored in Guam, I think it was, for like 2-3 months. It was taken off the table by a virus. You don't think our adversaries paid attention to that? So it just shows you it's not just a public health threat, but think about this too, is that our warfighters, right? It's all about preparation and the ability to deploy. That's what happens if you don't respect biology and not prepared for it. But I'm glad you brought that question because that threat has not gone away. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but given time, I'd like to go into more. But even though it's been, 5-6 years post-COVID, we're actually worse off now than we were back then. And who's better off right now is actually China. China is better off, can respond faster, can better protect their own citizenry. They can better protect their own warfighter faster, probably more effectively than we can right now. And we've inadvertently kind of contributed to that. But that's the bioweapon aspect of it. But I think the other uncomfortable truth is that biotechnology has also advanced in other things. And that if we look at it right now, I'm not worried about somebody engineering a virus to cause a zombie apocalypse, because that's how it's always been characterized around the world to our leaders.
Which is what I was hoping for. Like
Sorry,
zombie apocalypse.
I'm going to disappoint.
I'm good there,
but here's where this is what keeps me up at night, is that as it stands right now, we cannot make antibiotics to save ourselves. We've completely outsourced manufacturing to China. All of our generic drugs come from China. Most of the active ingredients that come in our frontline drugs come from China or from India. So that's a drug supply issue. But you also look at now post-COVID, China got WHO certification for their vaccines. They are dominating the world in DNA sequencing. So they have amassed a huge genetic library, either through legitimate acquisition, like so think university research collaborations, or acquiring or merging with companies that have access to information, right? So think of those genetic testing companies that you want to. I want to find out what percentage of this
Like
guy.
ancestry is me and all that stuff.
Don't do it. The whole point is that with the dawn of AI, they can do so much more now. So just a kind of an example, in 2023, I think it was, when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT 4, and that freaked out everybody, and even Elon Musk said, hey, we're reining in the end of humanity. I'm like, give me a break. But at the same time, and I don't know why this not get more attention, but Beidou Research, which is one of China's largest internet research companies, they published a paper, and they had their own generative AI, their LLM. And one of the first things they had to do was it analyzed our COVID mRNA vaccine sequence. And in 11 minutes, their AI came out with a new genetic sequence. And when they actually manufactured that vaccine, it turned out to be 128 times more stable, and which meant that it also had a 4 times stronger antibody response. And because of that stability, it did not require the same extreme cold temperatures for storage and shipping. So theoretically speaking, China is now better off in being able to detect a potential another next pandemic. Their AI, based on the data they have, can design a vaccine. They can mass produce it better and faster than us because they've invested in contract manufacturing over the years. So the nightmare scenario is not a zombie apocalypse for me anymore. The zombie apocalypse, I mean, the nightmare scenario for me is that we're going to wake up one day because, one, we did not realize how powerful biotechnology is. Two, we did not realize how valuable our data is, whether it's your genetic information, your medical history, your smartwatch that tracks your fitness. All that data is being acquired somewhere. And if you then turn AI onto that to start analyzing that, look at your behavior, start coming up with new therapeutics, new vaccines, that's the whole shebang. So the nightmare scenario is going to wake up with, we're going to wake up one day and realize, well, crap, we just become healthcare crack addicts, and China's putting them. So what happens if we're completely dependent upon a foreign source for all of our healthcare needs, all of our biodefense? They can either withhold it from us, like they did with masks, remember with PPE, but then either or that, or sell it to us at a huge markup. So not only is that a health threat, it's an economic threat, it's a future market grab, and it's a future job opportunity threat that, as I said, by the time my kid graduates from college, if they happen to study biology or computer science, then what prospects are they going to have? Because we dropped the ball, and all the data, all the AI capabilities, you don't need, right, the next generation ChatGPT. They have the data. AI is nothing without data. We tend to forget about that. And so if we because we took our eye off the ball, all the future job opportunities are going to be over there. So the nightmare scenario is not only just about the healthcare crack addicts, but in biotech, our hubs right now are what? Cambridge, Massachusetts, Silicon Valley in California, Austin in Texas. But what happens is suddenly becomes Suzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, China. Those are the centers of gravity for biotechnology and globally. We've lost the race.
So when Jackie introduced Ed to me and said, hey, there's this awesome guy, he's really an expert. And by the way, you're probably not going to sleep after you talk to him. I probably should have forewarned. This isn't going to be one of those events where you're like going home happy, for the record. And I laugh, and it is like a legitimate piece where this is the second person Jackie's introduced into a speaker series for us. And he was big on agentic AI and how agentic AI is going to take over the world. And essentially it's a Terminator type situation. And now you're talking about the bio side. It's always fascinating to me because we think about near peer threats or peer threats, and everybody knows, I mean, China's been on the radar for however long now, decades. But to the degree that you're talking about, it's not just that they've exceeded, it's we're so far behind and getting started even. And then as I'm wearing my iWatch, it tracks my fitness. Who has a Whoop ring? Anybody have one of those like sleep rings? to talk about. It's all so at least nobody has that. I'm gonna take off my iWatch real quick. But like that's also one of the things. Like we buy all the Apple iPhone stuff, right. And I think we haven't even educated society to the degree of what risk does that actually pose.
Yeah, no, that's really important point. And I don't mean to be a complete downer. The running joke is that it's like, dude, how do you sleep at night? And my response, oh yeah, I sleep like a baby. I sleep for 2 hours and then wake up crying and screaming and then try to go back to sleep again. So, but the point is that it's really true. We don't know how valuable our data is. And I think we're at an inflection point. I don't think we completely lost. I think we have a decision point to make right now. And this is why I appreciate forums like this, because, well, you all sit at the nexus of your job spot. If you're dealing with data, you have skin in the game. We need to be talking to our leaders. You need to be talking to your representatives. And it's not just in health. We're also losing out in agriculture, because biotech is going to be impactful in health, agriculture, manufacturing, renewable energy. It's all going to be bio. And if you're China with, huge sustainability problems, population sustainability problems, food insecurity, climate change issues, biotech is your silver bullet. And we need to wake up and understand that that's how powerful it is too. We just need to put our own incentives, our own resources, our own prioritizations in that space too. We can still win it. I mean, this is the reason why historically the US has been a leader in innovation. I think we just kind of lost sight of that. I think it's because we're playing keep away rather than understanding that this is why I call it a space race. You don't win a space race by playing defense all the time. No amount of export control, ITAR is going to win this for you. You have to out-innovate. You have to outrun your competitors.
And we think about when you look at policy and presidents and the way our politicians talk about China, especially current administration, there's a level, and military side, we have a level of egotism attached to we're the best always, right? When you think about the 50-year war that China's on, their strategy behind everything, they're executing on some things that I think we're not in our media and our politics, we don't really speak the truth attached to. Can you give an actual stance? Like, is Taiwan an issue for us, or losing Taiwan? All the things we talk about where China isn't an issue.
Yeah.
How much of an issue are they actually presenting for us, especially for the next generation of veterans?
Yeah, no. So again, this is why I think that this is an inflection point for all of us, because we need to understand what the playing field looks like right now. So do we need to think about, Taiwan and South China Sea? Of course we do. However, having said that, you don't think the Chinese are paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine, right? If drones, a couple $1,000 drone can take out, a T-72, T-80 tank, you don't think they're paying attention to that? And so in the mid 1990s, two PLA military colonels came out with a book, kind of like a manual. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. And basically they said, I think you gave us, you're shortchanging us. I think our military is still kick-ass.
I mean, at least the Army, for sure, right?
But I think they understand that going toe-to-toe conventionally is going to be potentially a losing proposition, or you're going to escalate it to a point where it's pretty bad. So what else can they do? And I think we're starting to see that what else. So if suddenly they're able to dominate healthcare, they're also starting to dominate agriculture. Like you all probably saw in the news about what's happening with the soy exports to China, right? People don't understand this, but the US is our biggest exports to China is actually agricultural, not technology. It's our soy, wheat, corn, sorghum. But in the last couple of years, guess what happened? Russia and China during the Ukraine war, when we leveled all those sanctions on Russia, the other side of the country, China lifted their ban on Russian wheat. So, and then in the last meeting between Xi and Putin in 2023, I think it was, they agreed on a 12-year, $28 billion agreement for Russia to sell all the 70 million metric tons of agricultural goods to China. China has also, because they're offering next generation GMO crop seeds, autonomous operating agricultural drones to do scanning and crop dusting. They're even helping Brazil construct their own dedicated satellites to screen their forestry and farmland. if you're John Deere or some other agriculture, you can't compete against that.
Mm.
So China has leveraged biotechnology to gain enormous amount of influence across ag sectors, especially in the global south, where that's where the highest concentration of agriculture and farming is. I hate to say it, but I hope it's not going to be the case. But I think our farmers are hosed.
Mm.
I don't think we're going to claw back on the soy market we lost, right? So yeah, sure, they made a paper agreement. They're going to sell. They're going to buy back what 25 million metric tons of our soy. Hasn't been done yet. Where they used to buy 40 million metric tons.
Mm.
And we're keeping the farming sector afloat, through subsidies, and that's not a winning proposition either. So we're not understanding knock-on effects. And if you're China, all you need is time. So they are reinforcing their own supply chains, right, for themselves. They suddenly potentially could become the breadbasket for the rest of the world, because if you think about it, if the war stopped in Ukraine today, and they're able to hold on to that Eastern Donbass region that they've annexed, that could buy Russia accounts for almost 25% of the world's wheat supply. We're not paying attention to that. So for those of you in the military, how often is agriculture ever brought up in strategy, right? When you talk about logistics, you're talking about influence, right? China and agriculture is all over Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America. If you're Indo-PACOM, if you're AFRICOM, if you're NORTHCOM and Western Hemisphere responsibility, if you're not paying attention to agriculture, shame on you. And so that's why it's not just the bioweapon, it's understanding that biotechnology, and I do this. Biotech, because of all the impact across multiple infrastructure sectors, it's called the bioeconomy, and Congress recognizes that. So I have a simple equation. Bioeconomic security equals economic security equals national security.
Mm.
It cannot just be, going toe to toe on a military standpoint. Sure, we want the 6th generation fighter, but if that's all we're banking on all of that and not understanding everything else that's happening in the world, we're in for a world of hurt.
So when you look at current administration, not saying one way or another politically, you're talking Greenland, you're talking Venezuela, and there's always the conversation, even Ukraine, with all the different natural resources and different aspects and minerals. How much of that is part of our play to combat this? Is that part of it, or is it just like a flex of power? Are we trying to gather resources because we're starting to see this on a national level?
Right. So for those of you, if you Google me, you're going to see that I've been making noise about the bioeconomy for over a decade now, and it's only now that it's starting to float up that we need to be concerned about this. I mean, I'm happy to report that Congress is actually working on pieces of legislation to specifically look at the bioeconomy. But to your point, though, it's a combination of problems that China is looking at a 50-year plan, right? And we have turnover every 4 years, maybe 8 if you get reelected, right? So we're at the whim of the administration change, and that's a problem. And I hate to say it, but at least just from what I'm looking at right now, some of the current administration's moves, at face value, it sort of makes sense, but strategically, I think it's a complete lack of understanding of what the bioeconomy is. The rest of the world gets it. The rest of the world gets it. I mark my words. The Chinese government, they're about to release their 15th five-year plan. So every 5 years, the Chinese government comes out with these strategies that the entire country is beholden to, all the way from government, provincial ministries, all the way down to the individual citizen and companies. I guarantee you, and bet whatever is left of my retirement, but I bet you that their 15th five-year plan, their top 3 priorities, one of them is going to be biotechnology. Mm. And so if the Chinese government is looking at biotechnology as a strategic priority, what I love about them is, one, I'm jealous because they get it, but 2, they make their intentions publicly known. And if anything, we should have the ability to look at that and say, okay, how do we stack up if that's the case? And if you do that, then we're going to find that man, we're behind the 8 ball.
And thinking about the veteran community, a lot of entrepreneurs in the room as well. What's that look like on the landscape as a new entrepreneur yourself?
Yep.
Is this something that on our level we should be thinking about impacting for our own businesses, for the corporations? I know you mentioned earlier educating leaders in our businesses, but how should we look at this on the landscape in the next 5-10 years? How it's going to impact us?
No, I appreciate that. So one of the things I've evolved over time, and you kind of got to touch on it. To me, no amount of AI, no amount of quantum, it means nothing without data. And wherever you sit, you're going to be dealing with data. Data is absolutely the new oil of the future. It's a new commodity. And it's not just, don't just think if you're working in finance sector, you're just thinking about the transactional information. Actually, that's not going to be the case. Think of the future to come, right? Of the Internet of Things, of 6G networks. You're going to have sensors everywhere. You're going to have sensors in your clothes. You already have smart refrigerators, smart thermostats. Pretty soon, you're going to have Wi-Fi connected toilets to look at how often are you going to the bathroom, what's the color of your pee, right? Actually, post 2023, I think every Ford and GM make model car has over 200 sensors. Did you know that? That you are actually telegraphing how hard are you stepping on the gas, on the brakes, your driving behavior. You're transmitting that to the companies, even though you haven't even Bluetooth connected your phones. You actually have to opt out of that when you at the purchase point time of the car. So there's going to be a massive land grab of data. And the key thing I want to highlight for you all is that don't get enamored with just the AI. You need to take stock of what type of data are you have access to. Well, how can it be monetized? How can it potentially become a commodity? And that is a completely different security proposition. And we need to be prepared for that. We need to be able to understand that today, because man, if you don't do it now, tomorrow you're not going to be able to stop the hemorrhaging.
And that's kind of where my mind was going with it, because I think about, I was in northern Afghanistan in 2019 when I deployed, and in 2019 we had one drone go over us, and it was like, what the hell is that? This is weird. You know, we took M4s and shot at it, right? You think the landscape now of warfare completely changed. You think about AI, and you think about how quick the turnover and churn of technology and new technology, and part of it, why I always love conversations like this, is how are we thinking about it 10 years from now? The monetization piece of it, right? How are we being proactive in implementing? So I think who's in like Bitcoin? Anybody ever buy Bitcoin? Okay. Did y'all buy it early? Or did you buy late? Late, right? And for me, like Bitcoin's one of those, I still don't buy into it. I've never purchased it, but then you have those people that bought in really early that are gajillionaires now. In this realm, I feel like there's something there that if we're smart about it, you optimize now, 10 years from now, you're kind of sitting pretty in a different way. But you have to understand the curve, the bell curve of these things. Where can we point a finger at and be actionable on it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a tall ask. But what I really love, and kind of read between the lines of everything we're articulating, I focus on bio because whenever you have these conversations about AI, it's all about, like I said, when's the next algorithm coming out? When's the next agentic AI coming out? No, it's just an enabler, right? And so what really helps is you look at the application. What are you doing with the AI, right? So suddenly it becomes, well, what about drones? Okay, well, it's not about kinetic attacks really, because if you look at it right now in agriculture, they're being adopted really fast, especially if you're talking about farmers who have limited resources, right? Almost every single drone flying in agriculture now are all Chinese. So they're cheaper, they're actually way more effective, and they are just mass effect. These Chinese agricultural drones are flying on every continent right now. So as we speak, these autonomous drones, that they have Baidu and Huawei technology on board, and with a little sweep of an app on a phone, a farmer can launch a fleet of these drones, fly over your field. They'll do video and infrared scanning. They'll know what the health and water usage of your plant is. In mid-flight, they can control exactly how much pesticide can be sprayed almost per plant. So it's a huge time saver, supply cost saver, labor cost saver. And they're flying over soy, wheat fields. They're flying over coffee fields in Brazil. They're flying over rice fields across Southeast Asia, cotton fields in Australia and New Zealand. Is anybody tracking the agricultural drones, right? So the drones that are using for law enforcement or military purpose or for government purposes, those get all the attention. but no one's paying attention to you're telling me our food sector is not important, and we're not paying attention to that. And even if we try to kind of do like the rip and replace like things that we did for Huawei, good luck trying to do that for our farmers, because if you take those away, what's the alternative? We don't have any. So bio really helps kind of provide context. And so what I try to do is use bio as kind of the model, and looking at this is what happens when you have a convergence of AI with data, with semiconductors, with autonomous systems. And then based on how it's being applied, crap, here are the downstream risks. So it's a different kind of framing. It's a different kind of analysis. And if I have my scathing criticism of the Intel community, especially when it comes to biotech and AI, we are absolutely asking the wrong questions. And so that's why you all actually have a huge advantage over the Intel community, because where you're in the private sector, you're in the thick of it, right? You're on the bleeding edge. So potentially how you're using your AI tools for your particular application, I almost guarantee you that the IC is not aware of that, right? Because if we're not asking the questions, there have been so many meetings when there's like, hey, we're going to talk about AI and bio. Okay? I want to go there. Let me tell you what's happening with CAR T cell therapies, what's happening with China and mRNA vaccines, what's happening in next generation healthcare. Nope. They want to know, how can AI make an effective virus that'll cause a zombie apocalypse? I'm like, really? Really? Just talk to the companies and look at what they're doing with AI. Factor that into your risk assessments. If you're not, you're fighting yesterday's war. So bear in mind that where you sit, you may not realize it, but your job role, your company's role, the data that you might have might be a really powerful model for looking at what national security should look like.
So now that everybody's in a very cheery mood, fascinating to me. Thank you for sharing those pieces. I do want to give time, and it's twofold. I want to move to Q&A. So Jackie, I'm going to pick on you first. Move to Q&A. I would love to hear thoughts, questions, probe. He said he's open to answer anything. The second piece of it is bucket closes about 8:15, 8:30. I always want time, and what I always love doing with speakers, the one-on-one conversations afterwards. You might not want to ask a question out loud. It might sound silly, like, should I get rid of my Apple Watch? Leave time for networking and selfies. That's a big thing. The bald guys love selfies, Ed especially. So make sure you get selfies before we leave. But I'm going to pick on Jackie to kick us off. Q&A. You have the list of questions. Because you're soft-spoken, I'm going to walk back there. Hopefully the microphone reaches back here.
Yeah. All right. So I think you did a great job of framing the problem set, but just to, bring it up to a maybe more positive note, let's think about like solution sets. And I'm curious about biomanufacturing. Like, what's your perspective on where we're at? Is that part of the solution? How realistic is it? Where are we at in terms of bringing it to fruition stateside in the United States? You can start there.
Yeah, no, hell yeah, it's a missed opportunity, right? Because again, I'm kind of unchained and unfiltered. It was a missed opportunity during COVID, because we could have leveraged the Defense Production Act to build biofoundries. Let me share a little anecdote that before we had the mRNA vaccines, we had the Novavax vaccine. So that's a traditional vaccine. So it's like a killed virus kind of style, and then the proteins are added, and then your body reacts to that. So there's something called an adjuvant that gets added. It's an additive that helps boost the immune response. And for Novavax, it came from a chemical that came from the soapbark tree. And this particular tree only grows in Brazil, and it has to be cured and extracted. And at the time of COVID, there was a lot of political unrest in Brazil, and there was a real concern that literally the supply of soapbark would go up in flames. There actually was, I think it was an Atlantic piece on just how fragile the supply chain was. Well, because I was at HHS, and because I was steeped in biotech because of my work, including things like synthetic biology, I went nuts if there ever was like a commission to look back at COVID response, I don't think there ever will be, unfortunately. But they'll probably see a whole slew of emails from yours truly saying, why don't we synthetic biology the solution? You can now program yeast and provide sugar, and it'll start making drug precursors for you because you just engineered to do so. Why don't we do that? And my proposal was, and then deputize all the microbreweries across the country and give them the yeast, and then they could start producing this component for our vaccine. That's creative thinking. And so the missed opportunity here is that had we invested and we had these bio foundries dotting the country, think about it. With a trade war we have right now, all the corn that we're not able to sell, all the soy that we're not able to sell, suddenly, if we had those biomanufacturing capabilities, we can just take those surpluses, which is rotting right now because we're not selling it to China, bring it into our own economy and convert that into ethanol, convert that into biodiesel or some other industrial chemical that we can bring into our economy. That's a phenomenal, we gain independence, but then also those become phenomenal sources of innovation if they have public-private partnerships between the government and state governments and universities, right? Because these are things that can continue to churn for startups. Easy peasy, but the problem is that you don't have the political will, you don't have the initial investments. But to me, it can happen. It should happen. I think states are doing that. I think they're waking up because they can't wait for the federal government to come up with the solutions. So absolutely, something like biomanufacturing, because right, if you had those different capabilities across the country, and then we got hit, God forbid, another, like a pandemic kind of thing, then suddenly when the balloon goes up, you have all this innate manufacturing capacity, just boom, bring up the bio countermeasures as quickly as possible. So yeah, it's there. We just have to have the ability to articulate why we need it and make those investments. Because it's not like the off-the-shelf vaccines or Cipro that we have right in our stockpiles. It has to transcend that.
The problem is if the breweries do that, where does the beer go?
You have to go dry for just a little bit.
For the Army side, y'all, I don't know if that's the thing. Any other thoughts, questions? I know Jackie's got a list, so if anybody wants to ask. James has, I'm sorry. I'm like hiding from James back here.
So I'm a little curious. Different perspective. The Chinese, if nothing else, are like deeply steeped in history. They sort of understand what's happening. They've seen the U.S. and a lot of Western countries, the U.S. particularly, project an enormous amount of soft power in the last 20 years,
right,
to influence cultures around the world. Speaking to later players that catastropically collapsed when they had towards hard power, which is what it feels like we're starting to do. I think looking at what China's developing, even from a vaccine perspective, they have a significant amount more to gain by projecting more of that soft power and just focusing on vaccines if another pandemic comes around. Why do you think that there is a potential that they would actually take it away from something that's working more with the soft power side and towards active defensive posture?
I don't think I said that. I think I said the complete opposite. Yeah, they don't need to go conventional because although they are making those significant investments in that, because there's a lot of reports, which is they're authentic. Like you look at their real estate collapse. However, you look at biotech, it's flourishing. And so yeah, maybe I'm sorry if I didn't articulate that appropriately. They're not looking at biotech from the traditional dual use, right? It's a military application for then a civilian use. They completely flip the script. It's like, let's go ahead and use the civilian application to garner more soft power and influence. And oh, by the way, the benefit is that the military can benefit from that as well too. So the script is completely flipped. So now, to me, a winning scenario is, don't make a bioweapon. Let the U.S. population become fat, high cholesterol, diabetic, and make them and get us hooked on their Lipitor and their insulin. That's the winning strategy.
So we've got an online question. I'm going to make Taylor read it. We've got Jim Krupe, who's a Army guy, naturally. So it should be a good question.
If you were to build and train a modern warfighter today and create a structure to support them, what would that look like?
that is different than what we are doing today?
That's a great question. So part of, and I would say even before that, something that colleges and then especially our military academies should adopt is that, especially from biotech, is absolutely becoming multidisciplinary in its approach, right? A lot of the biosecurity policies are like, oh, who's working in the laboratories that are where we have to wear the spacesuits, right? Those high containment laboratories. Well, biotech now is that you can just know how to code and you can have some profound impact in biotech. It's computer science, it's engineering, it's material sciences. So we collectively need to be looking at it in a multidisciplinary approach as well too. So I don't think they're doing it anymore, which is a crying shame. But just to kind of give you an example, there's something called the International Genetically Engineered Machine Competition. It's called IGEM. You should look it up, igem.org. It is an international synthetic biology competition for college students and high school students. It's phenomenal. It started off in 2005 with 60 students from 5 US universities. I think last year they had more than 7,000 participants from over 350 universities from over 43 countries. But here's the thing, more than half the teams now are from China. But the point is that all the teams are made up of college students that are not just bio, but it has to have computer science, engineering, sociology. But up until a few years ago, the military academies had IGEM team, which is awesome, right? So the Air Force Academy had a team, West Point had a team, and it kind of opened their eyes on not just the power of biotechnology, but the fact that, hey, if you have different disciplines working together, you can come up with something pretty profound. We need to leverage that more. And so we need to break down our stovepipes in talent development as well too, because you open yourselves up to not just the risks, because this is the happy side of it. If you have the ability to look at it in a multidisciplinary way, not only do you do better risk identification, but you actually find out new breakthrough innovation areas that we need to be going to next. So we missed out on that.
DC, I saw your hand go, one of those.
Yeah, so I have Carlos. Kind of formulated in my head, but you talk a lot about biotechnology for like agriculture and stuff like that. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with gene editing and things of that nature. Like companies like CRISPR.
Yep.
Right. Like how, in your opinion, like, is that beneficial?
Oh, absolutely it is. Oh, absolutely it is. It's CRISPR is helping generate the next generation GMO crop seeds that are going to be heat resistant, drought resistant, heat tolerance, right? You're seeing that with the next generation CAR T cell therapy. So these are taking your cells, genetically engineering them to then be reintroduced into you to identify and combat cancer cells. That's all gene editing. But I'm glad you brought that up, because as powerful as gene editing is, as powerful as CRISPR, it still has what they call off-target effects. It misses the mark when it goes to editing. What people don't realize is that how do you overcome that? You need more data, right? So here's a good analogy. Say you got the huge book War and Peace, right? If you took a page out and you edited it without seeing the rest of the story, you edit it and you put it back in, it might be complete nonsense. You need to look at the entire book to make sure that whatever edits you make makes sense in the rest of the plot. Same thing with our DNA, right? So the more DNA you have at a population scale, the more accurate tools like, today it's CRISPR, tomorrow it's going to be something else, the more powerful the application. And I didn't have time to go into it, but when it comes to data acquisition, man, China is vacuuming it up from around the world. And in 2022, they came up with new data cybersecurity laws where it is now, they have declared genetic data as a national resource. They get it. And as a result, they also put up security measures where we don't get to see any of their data. So there is no reciprocity. And if you think about it from a data analytics standpoint, if they're collecting data from all around the world, which I think that if you look at the open source, it's happening both licitly and illicitly. but we don't see any of their data that they're collecting on their 1.4 billion population. So theoretically speaking, they're building out one of the world's largest, most multifaceted, diverse data set you can think about. And then when they get tools like DeepSeek, or if they actually do break through with quantum computing, the data is, and then they're off to the races. But we're not calculating that risk. Like, to me, that's a ticking time bomb. So at the end of the day, we still have that data, right? But the problem is that they're all siloed for good reason. Like, we respect privacy, right? We respect HIPAA. We respect human security protections. And it kind of goes back to what I said before. We need that public-private partnership. So I had a meeting, I sponsored a meeting way back in 2014 on the bioeconomy. And I brought in experts from Google, Intel, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, Dell, and Qualcomm. And I challenged them, hey, this is the future of the US economy built on bio data, the bioeconomy. Where are we with national security? And unanimously, and these are not biologists, these are cyber and IT guys, and they said unanimously, we're doing a hell of a lot on privacy, but almost nothing on national security. But then when they thought about what's happening in bio, their immediate response, and this kind of goes back to the missed opportunity, is like, why don't we have the Biotech Manhattan Project? Why don't we have the national laboratories, our US government, partner with universities and have like a data lake that has security, that is you can confidently store your data. You have the security measures in place, and then that becomes an innovation hub. So then that way you can put in your question, get your answer out, and that could really be a source of innovation. But it makes sense on paper, but we just haven't had the political will or actually not even the understanding, right, of what's at stake. We're in this race. And so I really I love that question, because you just opened the door for like the bigger challenges that we're facing. It's still our data, whether they steal it or whether they get it. It's just, but we just need to know how to action upon it faster. And for the general public, here's the challenge that if you're a victim of identity theft today, right, you can change your credit card, you can change your PIN number. But if someone like China gets access to your genetic information or your medical history, once it's gone, and there's no getting that back. So we need to understand that there's a time component too, that it's not just what kind of data, but it's also how much data. And then it's just a matter of, when you have enough data, as the AI gets better, then suddenly the data you might not think, it doesn't mean all that much today, but tomorrow it can mean a hell of a lot. And a lot of our cybersecurity considerations does not take that into account.
Anybody have one more? Jackie's like ready. Ed, you're in trouble. She'll see you tomorrow. So good, man. Now go ahead.
And this might be, I don't know how much you jump into the cyberspace. 15, 20 years ago, 60 Minutes did an episode on a solar company out of Boston. Very, their intellectual property is very unique and it's one of a kind. And somehow, right, China got into it. They stole the intellectual. This is after the fact. They did actually, FBI did the investigation.
Right.
Covered. China stole it. He created their own company. Then for the technology.
Right.
It's like, where are we in the nation finding?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to say this right now. You're not going to like my answer.
I don't think I would.
Got to end on a bad note, right?
No,
Down.
but it's going to be a bad answer, but it's also it's going to serve as a challenge. I want this to be a challenge, and this is why I'm passionate about getting the word out. That should we worry about IP theft? Of course we should. However, that's not forward-looking, right? It's happening after the fact. What we need to start thinking about is, and I'm sounding like a broken record now, is that we need to be thinking about tomorrow. And why that's important is that China has always been called the fast follower, right? I don't think that's the case anymore. And in my mind, I'm starting to classify them as a fast adopter. And what I mean by that is that it's not them adopting our technology. Actually, it's more insidious. Is that I think that in some ways they've already leapfrogged us. And the other component is that they're now, and there's open source reporting on this, they're mobbing the international standard making bodies, right? So you think about the future, what I call the low altitude economy. So everything below 1,000 feet. So think about the future of drone delivered Grubhub or Uber Eats, right? Autonomous drone or what's called vertiports. You know, you're going to have electronic vertical takeoff landing taxis that are going to be autonomous operated. That economy is going to be huge. And for those of you, I'm dating myself here, but you all remember the Jetsons? You had Skyways, and you're going to have dedicated flight paths for these autonomous drones, It's a whole other economy that falls below the threshold of FAA oversight. But you know who's building out the regulations and the standards for that economy? China is going full bore, right? And so the adoption is they're going to adopt it, and they're going to force the rest of the world to adopt it as well too, if we're not paying attention. And so if they're becoming right, we're not understanding that there's advantage in first mover status. And if you can influence standards, you influence markets, and that gives you a humongous advantage. And again, at the end of the day, it's all data driven. So it's looking at collecting the data, developing the applications to make the data useful, but then developing the standards that the rest of the markets have to follow. Who's paying attention to the standard making, right? I don't think we are.
So I'm going to break my last question. Jim asked online another really good question. We've talked a lot about where China's excelling.
Yep.
What are the actual vulnerabilities that they have?
Oh, that's kind of an easy one, sort of. And this is why I think biotechnology is so important to them. Their military is no joke. I mean, if you look at where they are and their capabilities, it's pretty damn impressive of how far they've advanced. Probably through that, right? But here's the thing. This is the vulnerability. Guess what? As vaunted as they are, they've never deployed anywhere, right? They've never deployed anywhere. And so for those of you who served, again, thank you for your service, but do you remember how much effort went into your pre-deployment, right? Think of all the exams, the vaccinations, and then coming back home, you had to go through that whole process as well too. They never had to experience that. But guess what? If they get access to the information, if they get access to your medical history, if they get access to all that and then leverage AI, man, does that give them a fast shortcut. Right? And so here's kind of the wake-up call. I kind of this is, again, it's public knowledge. But did you guys know that China acquired GNC? This is many years ago, right?
Like the nutrition store? Yikes.
Where is the highest concentration of GNC stores located? Bases. And guess what? If you have a membership card and if they have access to the data, they're going to know, hey, looks like that supplement is pretty effective because look at how many people are actually buying it. Right? This regimen must be pretty effective. Oh, let's look into that. This is what I mean by we need to be paying attention to who has access to data. And so I came up with these three test questions when it comes to data and AI. And this is something I just came up with in the last 3 months that I've gone into independent consultancy. I've actually started publishing on this. To me, privacy is dead. At least how we define privacy today. There's no such thing as privacy. It's a pipe dream. However, in this era of AI and data, you need to be asking yourselves 3 questions. Data privacy actually now means who gets to see my data? Do we know? The second question is about data sovereignty. Data sovereignty is, okay, if you get access to my data, who determines what that data means? And then more importantly, who determines what the value of that data is? Because you know what? We don't control that. We don't. Companies control that. Governments control that. And then the third question, and this is where true data security to me is that question is, okay, who's going to utilize that data and for what purpose? And if you can't answer those 3 questions, then we're really not that secure. And then even more importantly, to your question, we're missing the opportunity of how we can actually utilize that data to innovate, to continue to out-innovate. but we're still holding on to this old framework of cybersecurity and privacy and HIPAA. It still serves a purpose, but it is absolutely not acknowledging where we are with AI today. And so I think those are three critical questions, especially from your company perspective. Don't just look at the data that you already know is valuable, that you already know that is high consequence. Look at all the other data that you might have, right? That you might have access to, and ask those three test questions, because then you might find out, one, it might be a huge freaking vulnerability that you may not have noticed before. But then secondly, it might be something that could really, really benefit your company as well too. So I think that might be a good place to kind of, highlight that there's a risk, but then there's also a grand challenge and opportunity.
No, I love that. And the last thing I'll ask you, as we're wrapping up this evening, your company, your website, where can we find like the continued journey? I know you said you've gotten very active on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
publishing a lot of the articles. Give us the handles, if you will.
I appreciate that. Thanks for leaving me to be able to do the plug. So yeah, it's only been 3.5 months, but I launched a company. It's called EHY Consulting. It's just my initials. But bottom line, the whole premise of my company is, and you got a taste of it, right? It's all the experience and all the exposure that I've had. And a lot of it is because I actually had, during my time with the Bureau, is face-to-face interactions with companies, with universities who are actually doing the work. They're on the bleeding edge. And then bringing all the experience I had as a recovering lab rat, 20 plus years in law enforcement, working in the intel community, working in foreign diplomacy, right? Bringing that strategic perspective, coming to universities or companies, hopefully, and just kind of providing that perspective to not just be the Chicken Little, like the sky is falling, the sky is falling. It is going to hit us on the head if we're not careful. But now I'm in a position to like, okay, let's creatively think of solutions. Like, damn it, let's not just be on the losing end. Let's not just be reactive. Let's kind of make sure that lean on our strength, because historically we've always been the innovation leaders. We always should be. And quite frankly, I don't mean for this to be a political statement, but our strength was, and I guess the best way to put this is that I gave this presentation, and then a professor from a top-notch university here in the U.S., and like he is the rock star in synthetic biology, came up to me immediately afterwards and like, hey Ed, myself and my student team were invited to go to the synthetic biology conference in China. Should I not go? And my response was, hell no, you have to go. You gotta go. You gotta go represent. For the love of God, don't go with your laptops and phones, please. But you gotta go, because that's the shining example of why, if from wherever country you might be, you want to come to the US. You want to contribute. There's a reason why we've been leaders in innovation, because we're not repressive. We respect individual views. We work collaboratively. That's been our superpower. I think we kind of lost sight of that. And if we're not careful, and I kind of said it's a veiled but real threat. Like, what happens if suddenly Cambridge, Massachusetts, Austin, Texas, Palo Alto, California, no longer become the centers of gravity for innovation? It becomes Suzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen. Not Beijing, it's too close to the government. But the point is that what if those suddenly become the centers of gravity from an innovation standpoint? We've lost the war.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
give a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Definitely insightful. Definitely terrifying, all in the same breath. We've got a few minutes, y'all. Definitely no rush by any means. Come flood Ed, give him some more questions, more thoughts, get the contact information, the LinkedIn, all the aspects where you can continue this journey. Overall, I've got to say, jumping in entrepreneurship is terrifying, especially leaving a government job. So if there's anything that our community can do, or if y'all think of anything to get him plugged in, please don't hesitate that piece. Let us know.
Appreciate
Y'all talk to him about that, because it's, if nothing else, nice guy, right? Conversational. We can chat and do more. So anything we can do to support, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here this evening. Let's
Thank you,
keep
everybody.
chit-chatting.